Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today, on the Positive Psychology Hour, we are going to be discussing the Keepers of the Lore, a legacy and store birthing hour with Nancy Polsky. For this session, you will need a pen and paper, a photo of a loved one, and a participatory spirit. Nancy, welcome to the call. We're so excited that you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in positive psychology?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Happy Hanukkah for those who celebrate. I've been a positive psychology practitioner in a corporate setting for about 5 years now. I've led leadership and learning and development corporate training for a couple of decades and have brought positive psychology in so that employees and business leaders can really bring their whole self, their best self, to their work life. I have worked with the Whole Being Institute and have a certification in positive psychology with them.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share the screen so that we can, because I know you have a lot of wonderful content today. So hang on one second. Let me know if you guys can see this. Thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Take it away, Nancy.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And this beautiful piece of art is by a friend of mine, Yalia Harold, who really cherished story through all sorts of medium, visual being a primary one. So welcome, welcome. Today is a very active session. So if you're shopping and multitasking today, it might be a little bit challenging. Thank you for your time and spirit today. So on the next slide, we're just going to review really quickly what we'll do today. Carolyn, if you could, please, thank you. So we're going to just do a little bit of foundational setting with positive psychology and strength-based work. Most of you are familiar with it. And then we'll get right into storytelling. What is lore, folklore, storytelling, why it is our legacy. We'll do some group activity and individual activity. And finally, this will be a great way to close out the year and head into 2023. I think this is the last of the positive psychology hours for the year. Okay, so wanted to give you a little bit of background. So most of you, I think, have joined us for these hours before. Maybe a quick show of hands if there's anyone that's not familiar with positive psychology. So, so just a minute to sort of reground us. Hi, Beth, nice to see you. And Maria, thank you. So positive psychology is the science of what makes life worth living. It's focused on both individual and societal well-being and optimal functioning. Over the last 25 years, it's really become a mainstream subfield, a new domain in psychology, and categorized by the American Psychological Association. And character strengths is a main tenet of positive psychology. Those are individual traits, positive individual traits, that is at the forefront of the positive psychology research. So these are 24 traits that were originally developed to provide positive psychology with a language and a common framework for categorizing well-being, categorizing that which enables and promotes good character and a good life. So those 24 traits right here, thank you, have been considered really a building block for positive psychology now for about 25 years. And it's studied, it's put into practice by psychologists, neuroscientists, educators, practitioners through all different domains. It's a classification system, and it stems from the efforts of Marty Seligman and others who categorized it. So this has really been a great foundation. Those of you who have taken the VIA character assessment will find that available for free online, and it's been administered to over 25 million people to date. So next slide. So just a quick show of hands if you have, oh, I think we're ahead a slide, but if you could go back, thanks. If you've done the assessment and if you're familiar with the character strength assessment, if you could just note that in the chat, that would help me today. So the idea is that everyone has a unique profile of these 24 traits that are rank ordered, and that reflects our personal identity. Most people are not really aware of that, but if you're doing this kind of work, you're joining these kinds of series, you may have a little, more grounding in this. There is a lot of work around making it the foundation of a more flourishing life. So let me give you a quick illustration. I have two sons. About 7 years ago, I just couldn't get my older son to be nice to his little brother. He was just a pain in the neck older brother, and kept razzing him and making him do his chores when I wasn't looking. And there was really no amount of me like finger wagging and berating him that was getting him to stop. So at the time I was studying with Whole Being Institute, I was studying positive psychology. And so I had the three of us take the VIA character self-assessment. And we sat down and we shared our rank order 24 strengths, and we focused on the top two. And we just sort of went around quite naturally and said, these are my top two. And the other two of us naturally strength spotted, what I'm calling strength spotted, which is to say, oh yeah, I see that in you. When your friends are down, kindness, you're that 2 a.m. phone call kind of friend. I can really see that in you. And so we went around and told each other spotting strengths, and that was very elevating, I would say. And so we each just felt like from that place, a much greater sense of flourishing. I am that person when I step into those strengths. And so from there, I could ask a simple question, which is, where in our lives do you think we could elevate it just a little bit more to have more consistency around living into our best selves? And from that place where we were already feeling sort of 10 feet tall, we each wrote down an area of opportunity. No shame, no finger wagging, trying to coerce my older son into being kinder to his brother. But without that, it was he noted his own opportunity to step further into his kindness and loyalty, which were two of his, kindness and love, I think. And from that, like his own internal motivation, he's just stopped being difficult with his brother. So that is to say, he recognized and really leaned into his strengths of love and kindness. Who am I when I'm at my best? And in that session, he pulled forth some new strengths around perspective and self-regulation so that he could flourish in his relationship with his brother. So I illustrate that if we could, next slide, please, to show you that a story, right? I told you a story of my son learning and leaning into his character strengths. And because of it, he and his brother and I are leading a more flourishing life, right? So first of all, thank you for listening to my story. Stories like this give us the opportunity to memorialize us when we're at our best. They're universal. I think any parent here can recognize a teenager who can be a little bit moody, and they connect us. So let me ask you, and maybe you could put some notes in the chat, how do you think creating story or storytelling plays into our character strengths? How can telling or listening to stories help us lead a more flourishing life? If you want to type in the chat. Yes, so stories give us resilience. It can be relatable. Yep, absolutely. And it can help us build relationships. The example that I had with my son there, to improve the relationship, absolutely. Yeah, and we can see the character traits, right? You can see the character trait of love, of perspective changing for my son in that story. And so those traits help us recognize them in ourselves. Nice, Donna, very nice. Absolutely, the best stories are relatable. Yes, and Joanne says that the stories we choose to tell absolutely can illustrate our own strengths and those we are talking to. Yes, that's lovely. So it's not just about the characters in the story, like my son for that's example, but it's about me too as the storyteller, and what are my strengths that I'm even recalling this story and sharing it with you. And what are your strengths for spending this hour with me in community as we listen to one another's stories? Excellent. Thank you. So really every culture, and Nancy says that it reminds us of our connections. Yes, absolutely. And every culture, right, for forever has our own stories, our own narratives. Stories are used to entertain, right? They can educate, they can illustrate. And as you're also saying, they can call out or memorialize or instill certain values, pass values to one another, or character strengths. They can model, as Kelly says, and elevate by modeling a growth mindset. Absolutely. So telling story, telling folklore, whether it's an oral tradition, whether it's written story, whether it's visual, film, movie, digital now, right? It's really one of the most common things we do as human beings. The medium may have changed over time, but that core concept of preserving stories, of singling out moments in time and making meaning through characters in place in a sequence of events, that really remains the same. That's really universal. So stories really are a vehicle for us to capture the best in us. Now, of course, there's like horror stories too that don't go so well, but since this is positive psychology hour, in the field in the positive psychology is to focus on what elevates us. For us today, we're going to focus on stories that capture the best in us and in our characters as storytellers and story listeners. So next slide, please. So this is just a very quick history, whether it was drawings in caves to hieroglyphics. The earliest forms of storytelling were visual, even before we had written words, right? Our great ancestors used stone, clay, wood, and other materials to communicate story, to pass down that information about life and survival. And oral storytelling, of course, has been around as long as we've had human language, whether it's through song or chants or poetry, or these have all been passed down by word of mouth. Radio came in 1895, and that changed how stories were told. It wasn't just between individuals any longer. It could now address large-scale audiences regardless of physical proximity. And today, podcasts are similar. I'm a big podcast listener when I'm out and about. And so oral storytelling has a long history as well. The invention of paper in China was really a game changer for written story. it led to the creation of books and print, and people could now combine pictures and text to tell story and to broaden their audience beyond the immediate proximity. And of course, the Gutenberg Bible, that really helped take off the written storytelling with the modern movable type printing press. So we had photographs that were first invented in 1820s. That was also a further catalyst for visual storytelling. And by the end of that century, we started to have motion into our video, then television and film. I remember the Wizard of Oz going from black and white into color when she lands in Oz, and that just enhanced the story like magic, right? So now we're in a digital age, and the internet, it has changed a lot about how we tell stories, but we still write and draw and communicate verbally, but many of us now tell our stories digitally. In fact, this session is being held digitally, right? And our stories on text and email and social media, story hours like this, continue to bring us together for storytelling. So despite the medium, the importance of storytelling has never wavered. It's really part of who we are as human beings and connecting to one another, as your comments indicated. When you tell story, when you listen to other story, we are really elevated through that one single moment in time. And when we do that, we elevate not just for ourselves, but for those around us. So with that, who's ready to tap into your strengths and capture the strengths of your loved ones, your characters, and become a storyteller? Okay, so let's get going with the audience participation part of the hour. So are you ready to capture what makes up a good story? You have a pen and paper, hopefully, and Donna talks about StoryCorps and the Moth. Those are fantastic through NPR radio where stories are told. Thank you. So the elements of a story, the sort of brass tacks, is there's character. So that could be a person or persons. It could be told, a story could be told in the first person in the voice of the character, or a third person from the narrator other than the character. The character can be an animal or an object that's come to life, right? But a story has to have at least one character. So grab your photo and your pen and paper and jot down real quick, who is your main character? You should have a loved one. Are you all clear on who is your main character? Okay, check. So next, the element includes setting. Where and when does a story take place? So this could be real, or it could be fantastic, fantasy. In fact, some of our best stories are imaginary. Think of the Harry Potter series. So now with your pen and paper, jot down real quick, do you know where your story takes place? And I don't mean literally in the photo, although you're welcome to capture that moment in time if there's something special about the photo or the moment, the setting in the photo. But if not, we're just storytelling today, and so you can make it up. So where do you want your story to take place? Where do you want to put your character? So as I mentioned with the Wizard of Oz, and when she moved from Kansas in the black and white into the colorful, wonderful world of Oz, right? The place, the setting is a really fundamental element of our story. So if you have a character and you have a setting, I would invite you to think about the setting like colorizing your scene. You're really bringing it to life the way that moment in the Wizard of Oz happened. So you can think of this as historical fiction for the loved one that you're going to write about today. Okay, and let's click to the next click, please. And so the final element I want to talk about is plot. And so these are the major events that happen in the story. And there generally is a beginning, a middle, and an end. So first this happened, then that happened, and finally this happened. So we're going to hold off on constructing your plot right now for your story. I'm going to dive in a little bit more about how to structure a common plot, and we'll get a chance to practice. Okay, so if you could just in chat, if you have identified your character and chosen a setting for a single scene for this character, maybe based on real life, maybe loosely based historical fiction. But in the chat, does everyone have character and setting? You can give a thumbs up. Okay, so we're going to move to a little more about structuring a great plot. So next slide. The plot is the story arc. It's the line that the story follows from the beginning to the end. And it's called an arc because usually there's a rising, there's a peak, and then there's a falling. And as I mentioned, it runs from the beginning to the middle and to the end. So the purpose of the plot is to move a character or a situation from one state to another to affect change, really, and advance the story. So in life, sometimes things can feel kind of that they happen randomly, that there's not specific cause. And the human brain, though, we need meaning. And so we need to understand why things might be going badly so that we can avoid it, or why things are well so that we could continue to do whatever it is that we think is working. And that's really one of the main reasons why we love story. Because story gives us a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. It gives us that shape. And they do that really through the story arc. So story arcs help us see the cause and effect and the connections between things that are otherwise feel sort of random. And when we do that, we get to experience a greater meaning, not just in the story, but in our own lives. We connect to the relatability of the story. And so as humans, our brains, we love story arc. So there's, if you just have a series of events, but you don't have a story arc, that's not really a story. That's just a series of events. The example I can think of is rags to riches, right? That's a common story arc. First, I was in rags, then something happened, I came to riches. And so I'm going to highlight Pixar because I think that they build story arc plot really well. One of the secrets to their success is that they have this 7-part plot structure that they use all the time. So who's ready to try? So, okay, we're going to create a story right here. So if you could click through. These are the 7 steps to a can't miss plot in your story. So once upon a time there was, every day, one day, and because of that, until finally, and ever since then. And so we're going to create a little bit of an improv right now. I'm going to ask you together, we're going to create a story. So if you haven't been on Zoom on the chat yet, we're going to try and create this together. So let's get started with the next slide, please. Okay, great. So first, remember we need a main character. Maybe there are supporting characters. We need a place and time where it takes place. And then we need a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we're going to do this together. I haven't done this before, so I'm excited for us to story tell together. So this is really just about fun and illustration and getting our creative juices flowing. So let's show the photo, please. Going to need that. Okay, great. So in the chat, someone want to just play with me and let me know who's our main character here? Who is our supporting characters? Let's give them names. Anyone? Okay, Maria says the woman in the middle is the main character. Great. And we're going to name her Esther. How's that? Georgia Lee is the lady on the right. Okay, so we've got Esther in the middle. Georgia Lee is her friend on the right. If it's a friend, I don't know. It might be part of the story. And how about the two gentlemen? Do they play as characters in this? Tom is Georgia's husband. I hope that's the one she has her arm around. So we've got Esther in the middle and Georgia Lee on the right, and Tom is her husband. And then we've got the other gentleman on the left. Let's give him a name. Anyone? Sydney, and that's Esther's younger brother. Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy. So we've got Esther in the middle, Sydney, her brother on the left, Georgia Lee on the right with her husband, Tom. Great. Next, I need someone to type into the chat, where are they in the story? Around what time frame? Where are they? Awesome. So we've got them on Coney Island, on the beach in Coney Island. Great. Do you want to give me around the 1890s? Excellent. Thanks, Joanne. Okay, so this group of four are on Coney Island in the 1890s. We've got Esther, our main character, her brother Sydney, and then Georgia Lee and Tom on the side. Great. So now we're going to get to the, can you click again, please? And again. So once more, so we've got the characters in the setting, and now let's type in, someone will answer for us. Let's just get started. Ready? So once upon a time, there was. If you guys want to type in anything. Okay, there were two best friends. Anyone else? We can start with that. That's fine. There were two best friends, and click, please. Once upon a time, there were two best friends. Carolyn, click, please. And every day, once upon a time, there were two best friends. And every day, two best friends who wanted to spend the day at the beach. And every day, can you write? So there were two best friends on the beach, and every day they wanted to spend the day at the beach. They planned to go, but something deterred them. Click, please. One day, so once upon a time, there were two friends who wanted to go to spend the day at the beach. They planned to go, but every day, but something deterred them. One day, I'm going to start telling the story. One day, they made it to the beach. And click. They made it to the beach with her brother Sydney in tow. And because of that, there's no right answers. We're just playing here. They found a golden starfish. Nancy says, because Her brother Sydney tagged along. Esther could not meet the lifeguard she was hoping to meet. I'm going to go with that one. So once upon a time, there was two friends who wanted to go to the beach. Every day they planned to go, but something deterred them. One day they went to the beach and their brother tagged along. Because they were there, because of that, Esther could not meet the lifeguard that she was hoping to meet. A little flirtatious there, Miss Esther. And click again, and because of that, because she couldn't meet the lifeguard, what happens? I told you this is going to be participatory. Because she couldn't meet the lifeguard, she was cranky. Thank you, Joanne. She was cranky. And so she had an argument with her brother. And they were fighting. And now click through. So she wanted to meet the lifeguard and she couldn't. And so she was cranky and she was arguing with her brother. Until finally, what happened? Until finally, ha-ha, Caroline, guess who came over and broke up the fight? Until finally, the lifeguard came over to break up the fight. And click. And Nancy says they left early. She met a man who would become the love of her life on the subway home. Okay, so we could go with either direction here, the lifeguard or the man on the subway. Let's go with the man on the subway. So just to illustrate, so once upon a time, there were two friends that wanted to go to the beach. Every day they planned to go, but something deterred them. One day they went, but their brother tagged along. Because of that, Esther didn't get to meet the lifeguard that she'd planned to meet. And because of that, she and her little brother, Sydney, argued until finally they left early. And wouldn't you know it, she met the man that would become the love of her life on the subway home. And ever since then, let's bring it on home. Ever since then, I'll finish it up. Ever since then, she loves the beach. That's right. She loves the beach that brought her to her love on the subway home. Okay, great. So great job. We were just practicing putting our story together using this 7-point arc. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you everyone for participating. Great job creating story together. Look at that. There are 27 participants on here, and together we just wrote a story. So think about the characters in that story, Esther and Sydney, the love of her life. What character strengths did you see in our characters? We saw, I would say, the love and zest. They were planning on going to the beach. Perseverance. They were determined to go even though they kept getting deterred. And curiosity and openness on the subway to look around, pop her head up and look around, and look at that. She found the love of her life, right? Nice. So hope. Nice, Rachel. So Esther had hope. Even though she was fighting with her brother, she had hope. So great. So like when I spotted the strengths, or I told the story of my son self-spotting his own strengths in how he was in his behavior towards his brother, or what we did just now was spot our strengths, strength spot. because these strengths are really in our characters, but they're also in each of us. As we talked about before, they're universal. And so when we take the time in story to notice a character's resilience or hope or gratitude, it's relatable to us in a positive type of way. So we relate to hope because we too are hopeful, or we relate to love because we too believe in love. So strength spotting in story is a way to elevate us in positive psychology. So the cool thing, happiness researchers say that creating together, specifically creating music through song, singing, and community, is one of the most universally happy experiences across geographies and societies. So I'm not sure if there's been research on collaborative story creation, but creating together is one of the happiest things that we do across societies. So thank you for enthusiastically creating that with me today, and great teamwork and zest and love of learning. I can see all of those strengths in us as storytellers, as one of you mentioned from the beginning. That is strength spotting, not just in our characters, but in ourselves. So people who take the time to strength spot and to notice strength in others and themselves, and then to take the time to savor the activity, working together to create a story in this case, have more moments of positive well-being over time. So the strength spotting in our characters and in ourselves, it builds upon itself, right? So strength begets strength. So that's really pretty neat. Thank you so much. Okay, so turn please. We have gone through a quick framework for what makes good story, a character's setting and plot. We used a specific technique for plot, and we created a story together. So now you're ready to step into your own story. So this is this part of the hour where you're going to bring your character to life. So first, I want to remind you, you already are a storyteller. That's something that we do naturally. We do that since we were children. It's something we just did, right? When we created that story, wasn't really about Esther on Coney Island. It was really about her strengths of love and hope and resilience that makes her story relatable and universal. So I picked Pixar, Up, and Monsters, Inc. I think that Pixar does a great job illustrating character strengths, and they do it in really funny, delightful characters that go through that typical arc that I mentioned. In Up, we may not remember the little boy's name, but we remember his kindness and his hope as contagious. Monsters, Inc., I hope you've all seen the monster and his little sidekick Buddy, and they are a zesty, zany little duo. We remember that. We remember how it makes us feel long after we remember the plot. So as storytellers, you as a storyteller remind us of a universal character trait that is depicted just in that moment in time, in just one episode really. And you're going to do that with the loved one that you chose. And as I said, picking a setting, even if you made up the setting because you have a photo that is not particularly set in a moment in time that you want to capture, the details don't really matter. Just like if they were on Coney Island or Atlantic City, the details don't really matter. Just decide, who is this person that we just have to meet? What's the one character trait that you want to convey about your loved one today? And think about, why is it so important that we meet them? So we're going to get ready. I'm going to invite you, if you click through please once more, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose and back out. Good. Do that again, please. In through your nose and back out. And with your eyes closed, I want you to think of your loved one, the character. Who are they when they are at their best? What character strengths is the basis of this story? Is this a story of love? Is it a story of bravery? A story of faith? Is it a story about a funny lady who made people laugh? Okay, go back to your paper. I'd invite you to open your eyes. You have the name of your character. You have the setting already. Now you're going to spend about 5 minutes. I'll mind the clock and give you a 1-minute warning to just write. You're going to write independently. On the screen are the 7 elements of a story arc. And you're going to write what you know about the character of your loved one. Don't let perfection get in the way of this being really good. Just write. Don't overthink this. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be historically accurate. It's just a fun exercise to colorize the character of your loved one. Okay, I'm going to mind the clock starting now. We're going to take 2 more minutes so we can get to sharing our stories. Let's just take about another 30 seconds, finish up, so we can come back together again. Okay, we're gonna regather so that we can share our story. So on the next slide, it's great that we are writing some stories, having fun with a moment in time for a loved one, maybe seeing something different in them we hadn't seen before. Creative writing, imagining a day in the life. Stories are meant to be listened to. So I'd love to ask for a participant to explore and share their story. We have 3 minutes, and I would love to ask someone to introduce your loved one's story using the 7-point story arc that we created. If you want to put your hand up or identify yourself on chat. Is there someone who wants to try? Can't see on the chat.
I can try. If
That's
no one else wants
fabulous.
to go. Okay, I might need a little help. Once upon a time, there was a plucky 3-year-old girl named Lena. Every day she woke up before her parents and crawled out of her crib and explored her room looking for her favorite toy, a wooden pull toy she fondly called Puppy. One day she couldn't find Puppy, and because of that, she burst into her parents' room, woke them up with big tears in her eyes, and gave them the sad news that Puppy had been lost. Because of that, the whole family decided to search for Puppy. Their search took them around the house, from the basement to the attic, around their neighborhood, and eventually to the corner store. And that's as far as I got in the time we had.
That's wonderful. And I can't see who your name.
Caroline, that's me.
Oh, Caroline, I'm sorry, I can't see. I think that's lovely, Caroline. So you've got a beautiful story about a little girl who lost her puppy. She was a plucky little girl who explored, and the whole family got in the search, right? And they explored and they ended up at the corner store. So as I ask the group, what strengths do you hear in the characters here in the story? I hear a strength of love, of the family getting together and rallying to find Puppy. Howard hears curiosity. She was a plucky little girl who loved to explore.
Yep.
Right, very nice. So at the heart, this is a story about a little girl filled with curiosity and zest and love with her family. And it's a story about a family who rallies together out of love and with perseverance to work together for a common cause and find the doll. Very nice. Thank you, Caroline.
Sure.
So you can see how this is a story that becomes universal, a story about a zesty, plucky little girl. It's not just a specific story that Carolyn had of a specific loved one.
And Kitty has her hand up. Should we unmute Kitty?
Absolutely. We have time for one more. That's great. Thank you, Kitty. Can you advance the slide too, please?
Sure. Kitty, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, I did. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Should I read it?
Sure.
Okay. Once upon a time, I chose a little brown tabby cat to take home from the ASPCA shelter. Every day she made me smile and feel loved whenever I looked at her. Because time flies, one day she was old and weak. I knew our time together was coming to an end and spent as much as possible in her company. Finally, she crossed the Rainbow Bridge, but because of her steadfast love, I was never alone because I had experienced true unconditional love from a cat.
Oh my gosh, I'm in tears. I don't know about you,
I am
Nancy.
too.
In just 5 minutes, right?
Yeah,
That's just beautiful.
thank
To
you.
know
Her
love,
name was
right?
Corey.
Mm.
Glory,
Corey.
Corey,
Corey.
Corey. Great. So when we think of that story, we see love, right? The unconditional love between you and Corey.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
We see perspective, right? As time flies and Corey's getting older, that we all can relate to. The spirituality of the moment around her crossing to the Rainbow Bridge, but you still feel like you're never alone because you've shared this true love with Corey. So that's what this story is about. Did you want to say something, Kitty?
No, just thank you for getting it so instantaneously. You must be an animal
Well,
too. Are you an animal lover too?
I don't have any animals, but I love them and I love love. And we all can relate to a story of love, right? And unconditional love and feeling like that love and kindness that you have
Thank
is
you.
beyond kindness. Yeah. In fact, if I could, I'd love to leave you with two things as we finish up this wonderful series for the year. One is a story. What else? A story from me. And then a challenge as we end 2022 and enter the next year. So Kitty, your story really transcended time and place and feeling like you're never alone because you've experienced this love with Corey. And so I wanted to tell you a story about the title of this talk today, Keepers of the Lore. So this is the third time that I've been able to present here at the JCC Positive Psychology Hour. And the first one was a month after my mom died rather unexpectedly. The talk on intergenerational forgiveness, it was really heartfelt, as you could imagine. Fresh on the heels of burying my mom. So I gave that talk, and that night I'd been battling some health issues. I promptly got very sick with a very high fever, about 105 fever for a week. And in that time I had what some would call a fever dream. Others may say it was a metaphysical experience, but I was sitting with two older relatives. I was bemoaning her loss, really missing my mom. And on the sofa next to me, it turns out there was mom. And she said to me, Nancy, we are the keepers of the lore. That's what we do, she told me. That's what we've always done, she said. And it's through us that their stories live on. And the other relative nodded in agreement. It's our great privilege, she reminded me. So it's in us, it's through us, it's through our keeping of the lore, of our bringing the story of that plucky 3-year-old to life, of our sharing in the universality of true love between two individuals, whether it's a cat or a person. It's through that our love and our legacies continue, and their legacies continue. And when you bring forth a strength-based story of your loved one today, whether they're here, perhaps the plucky little girl, or they've passed on, like Corey, you, in your unique voice, inevitably are keeping the lore. You're adding to a rich history and tapestry in your family's legacy. So there's a reason that each one of you joined for the hour today. And I would suggest that bound up in that reason is our own strengths. That it's what our stories really feed off of. It's the strength inside each of us that called us really to be keepers of the lore. It's the strength inside you, Caroline, that had you tell that story today, and Kitty as well. And so when you know your strengths, you bring that as a storyteller, then you'll know what your contribution is. So my challenge to you as we end this series is to know your strengths, is to embody them in simple acts, like spending this hour together, creating story, memorializing story, bringing voice to story, connecting with one another through story. And that living in your strengths. Now, that is the heart of really great storytelling. As we wrap up, I want to thank you for your participation, for your energy, for showing up, Kitty, Caroline, for sharing your stories, everyone for participating in the meeting chat. What a wonderful gift that you bring to one another, and what beautiful way to end the year. We're all so much better for it. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Nancy. May I stop sharing for a moment so we can see you and see one another?
Nice.
I don't know, I find myself a little emotional today. Anybody else? Yeah, I see lots of nods. I think that's a beautiful reframe for the end of the year. I think it sort of just takes on a completely different meaning. Anybody else feel that way about how to create the transition from one year to the next and make a connection to yourself and to those that you love, whether it's your chosen family, your real family, the parts of yourself, right? Those of you that may be living alone, there's a lot of internal world or your environment. So Nancy, I just thank you so much for doing this with us and presenting this today. Anybody else pleasantly surprised? Right? It reminds me of my music teacher, composition teacher. When I was studying dance, I had a music teacher who had studied with Jerome Robbins, and she said, Betty Wahlberg, she said, it's when you know you hit it, when there's something in the music that you couldn't predict, but when it happens, you go, but of course. And this is what I feel in terms of savoring and satisfaction. The way you have framed this, it's like, but of course, stories do this. And what a beautiful way to end the year. How did I not think of this before? So thank you for this gift, this little gem, this jewel that's with us all the time. We can create stories with one another when we talk and when we converse. And I just feel very blessed. Anybody else? Yeah, I hear our life is lore. What a great session today. Thank you, Nancy and Caroline. Really feeling that connection. My first time trying this, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so very much. Beautiful. Yeah. Take it in, Nancy. It's just been a treat. I hope you will come back and grace us again for a fourth time in the new year, everyone. I will be the curator. Phoebe has moved on to doing some wonderful, wonderful things. I don't know if Phoebe's in the house. She said she was going to try and jump on and wish everybody a happy new year, but she's extremely busy. She's working in a new capacity with Tal Ben-Shahar, and we're excited for her. And what we're going to be exploring next year is books that changed our lives with our speakers and how those books have impacted their view of positive psychology and their world. So Nancy, I hope you will come back as one of our guests for that part of the series. Everyone, just so you know, January 3rd, we will be off. We will start the next week. Have an amazing holiday. May the end of the year be full of stories that enrich you, enliven you, and restore you. And we'll create more magic together in 2023. Thank you so much, everyone. Be well. And thank you, Nancy.